Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street, an Algorand video here for you guys today, ALGO on the exchange. Before we go into this one, don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel and smash that subscribe button if you have not done so already. Welcome if you're new and welcome back if you've been with us for some time. So it's been a while since we looked at Algorand. I can't remember the last time we did a video on these guys. There's a few interesting updates in the last few weeks, and particularly off the back of the Digital Pound Foundation event that I was at last week. There's a bit of dot connecting in my head and to understand the implications and the integrations that are going on worldwide right now with CBDC platforms. We'll go into a bit more detail about that. I think people may be getting a bit tired of this CBDC narrative, but at the end of the day, and I firmly believe this, the next big bull cycle will arguably be massively generated because of this narrative. This is really speeding up, guys. I've still got to do my review video from that event. It was absolutely interesting. There's obviously loads of pros and cons towards CBDC systems and integrations, but Algorand is one of those indeed that are powering systems worldwide. I think we covered a video about nearly 2 years ago of Algorand's involvement with the digital pound here in the UK. I don't have too much research on how that is developing for the UK side of things, but certainly worldwide they are making moves. I'm going to start with this one, guys. So Visa, and this is going to go into a bit more detail about why this is linked with Algorand. Visa to develop Brazilian blockchain-powered CBDC project. Now, there's a couple of statistics not written in this article, which is a bit disappointing, really, that they missed this out, because CBDCs, right, arguably programmable money, right, in a digital format. There's, as I said, pros and cons to this kind of way of movement in terms of finance. And one of the really interesting questions that kept getting avoided at things like the Digital Pound Foundation event the other week from people in the media, etc., that were present about why does the public need this? Like, what is the positive side of it to the general public? And actually the conversations were completely around the banking system, the advancements of speed, the economic side of it, the transparency, the verification processing, the reduction in costs all over. And then the end user side of it was, well, why is this, or how is this different to cash? Or indeed, I know a lot of people don't use cash like myself anymore. I'm very much, tap and go, cashless payments, etc., which is kind of what they were trying to achieve anyway. It just obviously got accelerated through the pandemic. But this conversation at the end of it is like, to be honest, like I think the majority of the population around the world, probably including myself, are very kind of not necessarily happy with banks or anything at all. But the way that we make payments and do things seems to be okay. And obviously in the back end side of it, from a sustainability perspective, the cost and all of those things, which we did a massive video on a while back, I will leave that in the description below, and hopefully it'll pop up on the screen at the end of this video as well. We went into very fine detail about energy consumption, cost towards banks, etc., versus cryptocurrency or the utilization of blockchain. So with all these things in mind, we're kind of sitting there going, well, what is one of the main advantages of utilizing blockchain and potentially a CBDC system? Well, there's a couple of things particularly that people don't really talk about. And we talk about the population of the world is absolutely huge, right? But in this instance, we're going to focus on Brazil. I'm just going to point this out. So as of 2021, I think it's slightly higher than this number, but this article is actually not too old. It's from March. So according to World Bank, Brazil's population is 213 million. So already this is kind of like the infrastructure in place of the population, arguably your target audience as a banking system, right? However, 30 million, and this statistic, by the way, is very apparent across the world. I think there's something like 2 billion in total that are unbankable. And we'll go into a bit more detail and conversation about that because it does loop around to Algorand in a second. 30 million people are unbanked, i.e. do not have or use a bank account. Now, the conversations at the Digital Pound Foundation event the other day, or the other week, were very much around that people perhaps don't trust banks and they utilize cash. But then utilizing cash avoids potentially things like tax or perhaps the transparency of things, or are we being paid fairly or not fairly? And just in general for the economy, a lot of lost money potentially. So there's a partial advantage of using blockchain and a CBDC system to bring this inclusivity together. However, there is also a conversation that these people who are not bankable, for whatever reason that is, then come into a system. Will that be something that completely changes the philosophy of way the people pay things or behave in general with utilization of money, and all the ethics and all this kind of stuff comes into play as a conversation? There's loads of things going on in the background that a lot of people don't know in the conversation levels. And talking about Bank of England, Swift that were there, head of technology, etc., and the panelists, these are the kind of conversations they were talking about. So when we loop it back around to this, like, there's a system here, opportunity system, to say that actually eventually, potentially, if we remove cash or this existing kind of system and transfer it across, which is an argument to say that this could happen from 2025 onwards, and especially with the target goals to have 2030, pretty much every country is fully operational in this system, to say that actually anything outside that won't work. Now, they do say, not just in articles, but also what was mentioned at the event, take it with a pinch of salt potentially. They were suggesting that cash, or indeed our existing money system, can work alongside CBDCs. But let's not kid ourselves. I'm pretty sure the transitional period, whether it be 5, 10, 15 years, is to get people more and more used to that and then switch off the old systems. Because the argument that they're making at the moment is the existing system, too costly, too archaic. Why on earth would they want to continue it versus one that they're trying to accelerate with? Well, obviously there's a reason behind that. Generational aspects, people deciding whether they do or don't want to get involved in that. Will we even have a choice? These are all big questions. But looping back to the conversation about Algorand, blockchain, CBDCs, is the opportunity for tokenization. Now, this tokenization aspect, we've seen a lot about NFTs over the last few years, non-fungible tokens, and this was very much in the format of artwork. But I've always suggested to everyone from the very beginning that NFTs are an application towards anything and everything you could possibly think of. And in fact, there's a new kind of abbreviation more recently called PNFT, which is physical NFT. This is where we take a physical asset and we could potentially fractionalize this to generate a value that could be separated. So if you've got like an investment with a couple of friends in a watch, for example, you could fractionalize that, but also have it as a digital entity that only could be sold or passed on to other people legally and digitally and viably if everyone signs that contract address that's associated with the NFT, if that makes sense. So this tokenization aspect isn't just also about these kind of things and us as commodities and all these things. You know, commodity wise, we're talking about things like food, soya beans, wheat. Each of these can be tokenized. And in fact, one of the reasons I bring out this particular conversation is because Visa is building this CBDC system platform, right? And they talk heavily here about NFTs, the ability for tokenization on chain, but this also liaises with something else that's come out recently. And this has been trialed for about a year or two anyway. But look at this. Lift Challenge, the Central Bank of Brazil and Visa and its partners have developed a programmable financial platform with which farmers can securely finance and sell their crops using blockchain technology. The tokenization of commodities, guys, wheat, soya, everything. And one of the big partners behind this is this Agrotoken, created by Algorand. And this is fascinating. So this proves obviously like the piloting, the trial's been going for some time. But the point being is that farmers in this instance have the ability to take their commodities that they harvest and seed, etc., turn those into physical tradable digital assets that they can then obviously convert or utilize in the system to pay for things. Now you could argue, well, why aren't these people just going to the trade mechanisms like they usually do, wait for the cash to come in and go and buy their stuff like they normally do? Well, that's where the transparency, the validation comes in, the control of money, all of these things, these variables kick into play as to why they would want to do this. And there's an argument to say the speed at which this happens is faster. The farmers get their money quicker. It's also a flow of information and data that can be taken from this as to where those crops eventually lead up to, and us from the end user perspective being able to look at this from a sustainability pattern and go, oh, I can see the entire history of where this tokenized piece of wheat has come from, and is that a sustainable thing? Is it a moral thing for me to buy? Are they being paid enough or not, or not at all? So there's all these things in the background, and it's very interesting. Here's an example of one of these, soya. Okay, so this is related to through the Algorand platform using the Agrotoken, the soya token. This is crazy, right? This is how it's all going to work. And just a quick area of this, Agrotoken is a global tokenization platform for agro commodities. So as we just said, wheat, flour, all of this stuff. They're a team of professionals passionate about agribusiness and a new digital economy, creators of the first grain-backed crypto assets. Agrotoken is a gateway between traditional agribusiness and the emerging crypto economy. It's absolutely really interesting. So when we talk about not just worldwide economics here and supply chain and supply and demand, Brazil is a gigantic population. We've seen that number. We've also seen the number of the people that are unbankable. So when we look back at these conversation around Visa's point of view, that there's an opportunity here for a huge powered CBDC project when it's also interlaced with these kind of projects and technologies. So Visa presents integration project with Real Digital. This is utilizing the Agrotoken and a couple of others like Microsoft, for example. You can start building this dot connection of how this is all going to work. How Visa can enable programmable finance on CBDCs. Talking about cross-border investments and stuff like this, we've already covered this many times, but this is the point here. The prototype platform brings existing financial processes and assets on chain, allowing farmers to tokenize traditional contracts. To achieve this, Visa combined Agrotoken's agricultural commodity tokenization expertise with existing solutions in Brazil and Latin America. This in particular, LATAM, huge. To deliver a tokenization process that transforms existing Brazilian legal documents into an on-chain tradable NFT. So when people talk about utility, this is one example. And when they talk about the power of these kind of blockchains and these crypto projects, like we're talking here about Algorand in particular, this gives you a sense of the magnitude of the opportunity. And people always say, well, why is the price so low if this has such great opportunity? Well, that's because it's still in trial methods. It's arguably still in simulation method. And in fact, on that point, this is quite an interesting thing from Algorand as well, is that they recently had, I think they called it the simulation project or something along these lines, right? And it was basically to simulate smart contracts via Algorand. This means that it could arguably test something before it actually happened to go, actually, is this going to be too expensive? Is it going to be too slow? Is this even going to be successful? Will it fail for whatever reason along that chain? And it's really interesting when we talk about AI and the integration of AI and things into blockchain. It becomes a really big, massive topic, because then all of a sudden you've got this AI algorithm that can determine whether a financial play would be worth it or not down the line or along that pathway, and be able to fix itself before it gets to a potential issue in the future. So when we're talking back about why farmers would do this and be able to tokenize everything, this is kind of like one of the reasons why. The validation process, the speed at which it can be done, the speed of which they could be paid. But there's always the flip of the coin about this CBDC infrastructure that actually, if we're all on this and it is programmable, there is the potential opportunity for it to be fully controlled, in the sense that maybe you won't get your money because you haven't done this, or you haven't paid this. And in terms of taxes and stuff, this should in theory be all automated. We shouldn't have to deal with that anymore. It should just be done through the system, right? So there's all these like extra questions coming out of this, but the imperative point here is that there's a massive market, just talking about Brazil as an individual, coming into play for the CBDC system and tokenization of assets. And when you look at the big exporters of the world, Brazil exports a phenomenal amount of commodities to the worldwide nations, and including their local regionalized nations as well. The opportunity is there, and that's why you look at it as a project, as a token, to say, well, actually, it's in the very early stages. Once this gets fully adopted and fully integrated to millions upon millions of people around the world, this is when it takes off. That's why I like to think about things in a very long-term pattern. Of course, you can make short-term gains in the cycle periods, but if you're in a long-term game because you want an investment in something that really means something for the future and the development of the world, this is the kind of token and project you want to be involved in. There's an argument always with Algorand that they are decentralized, but there's an argument to say, well, if you're involved in CBDCs, how can you possibly have a utilization of decentralization if you're going to be operating in centralized systems? This is a big argument. However, there is an opportunity from the other side of things, that if you don't go down the CBDC route, which I believe personally is more at the moment, and certainly for the short term, a wholesale solution, not so much a retail solution, i.e. an end user like us, the public, until maybe further down the line when all the tests and stuff are implemented properly, that actually these decentralized systems can be almost a trial for us all to see how this works in a digitalized format. Grains, etc., buying tokens, converting cryptocurrency tokens to soya ones, for example, to pay for these kind of things. Or in particular, I think there was an interesting story that I was reading about one of the farmers recently who had purchased a tractor by selling his commodities through digitalization, through tokenization, to pay for that. And again, you could argue, well, why didn't you sell it in the normal way and then buy the tractor? But actually, this way round was a lot quicker. It was a lot faster. In that sense as well, but you can see here there's a bit of I'm going to leave this article in the descriptions below because it really is an interesting case study of how this kind of worked. But yeah, look, just read this bit. Transforming grain into a kind of digital currency to buy machinery and implements is already a reality in Brazilian agribusiness. And we go to mention one of the farmers here is updating his machinery fleet and partly paid for this his New Holland T8 tractor, sounds awesome, with his grain. He transformed it into bankable digital assets, and it is the first time that this business model has been implemented in Brazil. Now, this was back in February. I think it might have happened slightly before then. This is only when it was reported, of course. But you can see the pattern. You can see the pattern. When more and more farmers and other businesses cotton onto this and the realization of this, if you loop back to you as an investor or you understanding or wondering, well, why is this project so low cost? Or why is this project this way and it's not doing anything? Think about the longevity of it. Trust me, this is going to be so interesting to see over the course of many different chains, many different projects that we are so early. There's some that are flying, obviously, in the last few years because they have been utilized, they've been adopted more and more. And these bigger ones, these are so early and they're in such a massive integration process right now worldwide on a political level, a geopolitical level as well. It's really exciting and interesting to see. Whether or not the CBDC is the right way for us to go or not is constantly up for debate, of course. But as an investor and someone that understands what's going on in this world right now and what's going to come, you kind of like assess and see what's available to invest in and what the opportunities are. And this is certainly one of them. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below because I find this really interesting. And if you have any other examples of this kind of thing going on worldwide, do let me know as well. I'm always up for extra research and learning more things myself that I can hopefully provide to you guys in the near future as well, of course. So that in mind, guys, I think, as I said, that's really interesting to see all of that development for sure. I think what would be good right now is to go into the Algorand's token pricing and a bit of the chart analysis here. One key thing I wanted to point out, obviously, this is the history of Algorand, so it's had quite an interesting journey up until this current point. But the main focus right now is this short-term area. Okay, so previously back in December, you may have remembered we hit that 16 cent mark, or I think it was about 15.9 or something. We're now at 17.8, so we had that drive up for a couple of months, all the way up to the middle of February, roughly, to 30 cents. Fantastic miniature cycle there. But as time has gone by, that could not support that level. And in fact, if you see the lower region to one of the higher regions, you can start seeing the development of potential areas of support and resistance. And it's very, very well done here, really, because you can see the traction at each of these different fib level lines. And more importantly, from my perspective, is this longer term one, taking one of the old, really old lower regions and the higher regions way at the top of that 30 cent mark. You can start to see an interesting move here. So looking at this red line here, that goes all the way across around this sort of 17, I think it's roughly around 17.8 cents, right? It's kind of roughly matching the short-term one as well, so you can confirm arguably its relative accuracy here. And if I just pull this one across, we've got full data across the whole thing. We're matching this period that we saw back in December, and it's right where we are now. And if we look in really intricate detail, we can see the closing modules over the last couple of weeks have indicated that we're still in that bear run here. Really helped out, by the way, on this 19th of April drop, where we completely eradicated 2 or 3 support areas. So we've got a bit of resistance here at the moment, and this is where I find it really intriguing. will we dip down there and start attacking these kind of like mid 16-cent marks or even lower than that to get to these bottom levels of the short-term fib retracement chart here, 16 cents? There's an argument to say so, and in fact, if we go back, there's an argument to say that we could still test these lower regions because the lower point's all the way down here, and there is an argument that if we took that top and that bottom area, these could be potential areas of interest to purchase if we break this area. So in this big bull cycle we're in, the economy around the world is still a mess, right? It's still a bit frantic. No one really knows what's going on, etc., etc. There's an argument to say that that could happen. So for me personally, I've still always got my buy orders down at these low regions. I always leave the circles in there, even when they, not necessarily when they go up, but certainly on their way downs. I try and get those areas. I think they're really good opportunities there. So for sure, there is an interest to me at this lower 16-cent mark, but I would also be playing with the fact that this could potentially come down to some of these low regions. I'm not suggesting it's coming all the way back down here again, but on the other side, guys, we must remember this in all the kind of like chart data really, is that there's a huge gap here, a huge gap for testing. This was too chaotic, too high, too quick. It was part of the big bull cycle in 2021, etc. As we all remember, especially around that metaverse NFT conversations and what was going on. My point being is that between, and I'll just draw it in so you guys know exactly what I'm talking about here, sort of between where we are roughly right now and this area is quite a lot, 5 or 6 cent mark. And there's no data really, other than this area here and a couple of top resistance back here, October 2019. There's an argument to say that there's not enough traction or confidence at these areas to hold and withstand this area potentially. Hopefully it does, because I do think there's a lot of confidence in general. There's a lot of holders of Algorand. Yes, majority, I think it's like 97-98% of Algorand wallets are in loss, and that's kind of understandable because a lot of people were buying at different stages. We had a big massive bull run, everyone's getting FOMO, etc., including myself. I'm very late to the Algorand party, to be honest. I've only been holding it for just under a year, and it's something I'm trying to accumulate at the lower price points, which is why I try and analyze the potential opportunities at these lower regions. I definitely feel right now, and personally, which is what I am definitely doing, is taking advantage of these manual purchase areas of where it is currently now, but with the anticipation that I hold some capital back just in case we hit these lower regions again. And if that breaks, which I do think we have to test, again, to the point back here, we did dip down in those areas, that could be an opportunity at the lower regions as well to save ourselves a bit of money and accumulate more for less money as well. Not sure what you guys think. I'm really interested to know your comments in the description stuff below. But for right now, the RSI is showing 33 on the 14-day. Again, as I said, an opportunist area right now, personally. It's not financial advice. And 28 days showing 40. So good bite points there. But again, pinpointing that area that we are still in this kind of like bear movement. So we just got to be as risk free as possible, DCAing as much as we can, and taking the opportunity to really reflect on the history of this chart and where we've been, looking at how the psychology of trading works and the traders in general work. I mean, if we again zoom in, the volumes aren't huge, and so that's why I'm sort of sitting there going, right, people obviously taking a bit of a step back, in my opinion, and just waiting to see what happens. So there's my 3 areas of interest, where we are right now, slightly in between that, just under that 16-cent mark, and then I've got one at the lower regions of 16, and potentially down at 14.5. We'll have to see how that comes in over the coming month or two. Performance-wise, kind of confirms what we were just talking about. Down 5% on the week, 16% down on the month, 29% down in the 3 months, which is a bit of a shame because we did have that big up run. Just about year to date is still green, but that's obviously going to probably come into red at some point. And in my opinion, confirming that we're probably on a bit further way down. So I'm being a bit patient as much as I can. It's difficult sometimes because it is at some good price points even now compared to where it will be in the future. That's the main story here. Guys, I'm going to wrap that up there. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think about Algorand in general and the topics we discussed. Anything else you guys want to throw out there in terms of Algorand, please do. And any comments on the chart stuff as well. What have you been doing? Buying, selling, waiting like I am as well? Let us know. Thank you so much for watching. We'll indeed see you in the next Algorand video. Take care. Bye-bye.